Now let's look at the value attribute. We learned about input tags in HTML. Input tags use a value attribute rather than inner HTML for its content. Here's an example. We have an input element and our value is 25.8. Let's look at our code. Here we have an input attribute, and there isn't a value on the line here. So if we look at that, we see there's no value in our input box. However, we could add that optional attribute and then it's pre-populated with that value. That's different than the inner HTML because input doesn't have an opening tag and a closing tag. Everything is just inside the tag itself. The type, the ID, and the value are all attributes of the tag, and there is no value between the tags of opening and closing. Therefore, we have to access it a little bit differently in our JavaScript. In order to access it in JavaScript, we have to use the value property. So here we have an example where we're getting the value out of the input box by using the name, the ID of the HTML element, and using a dot value. Let's try that. Now we won't know if it worked unless we add an alert. So I'm going to alert our yard time value. And I can save that with Control S, refresh it, and now if we click on Convert to Meters, you can see it's pulling that 25.8 out of the box. Now we want to make sure this is dynamic, that it's not just pulling the 25.8 out because we set it as the value, but that we could type in any value. If I typed in 56.4 and I click Convert to Meters, it's pulling out exactly what we typed in, 56.4. Now we have the value from what the user typed into the page. We can also set the input value programmatically in JavaScript. So now instead of getting the value and storing it into a variable, we're going to assign the value some number. Let's try that in the code. So let's go ahead and put in that we want our yard time, which is our DOM object based on the ID given on line 11. And we're going to take the dot value and assign it a new value. What did I say? 27.8. 27.8. Let's save it and see if it works. I'm going to Control S to save. Refresh. I refreshed, so it gave me that initial value of 25.8. I click on Convert to Meters. It tells me that 25.8 was in the box. And now this line 23 just got executed and it's changing that value to 27.8. So let's look at what we want to do with this actual web page. It says it's going to convert a swimming time for a yard race to the equivalent for a meter race. So we don't want to just randomly put in different numbers, but we actually want to do a calculation based on the time they entered into the box. Well, let's take a look at the code that we need to do that. in our function, what we want to do is we want to get out our yard time value. Remember, we can access that value by putting in the ID of the HTML element and dot value. So here we're saying take that value and multiply it by 1.1. That's the conversion rate known for swimming times. So if we take that yard time value and multiply it by 1.1, that's our new meter time. Let's go ahead and try that. So we're getting our yard time dot value, that's getting whatever was typed into the box, multiplying it by 1.1, and that's our new time. Well, let's alert it to see what we're getting. Put a semicolon at the end there. Save it. And refresh. Let's put in maybe 53 seconds. I click on Convert to Meters, and it's saying, okay, if I multiply that by 1.1, I get 58.3. Well, that makes sense. But we don't really enjoy a lot of pop-ups on our web pages. They get annoying. You have to clear them. So instead, we want to just write that value back onto the page. So we're going to create a new input box to put that meter time into. I'm going to grab that. And where do I need to put that in my code? Well, I can't put it in the script because it's an HTML tag. So I will put it into my HTML. And I probably want a label on that. So I'm just going to type in meter time and put a colon after it. And maybe I should start that with a new paragraph. And the editor helps me out by putting the closing tag right away. And I want that input box right in the paragraph. So I'll go ahead and put that in the paragraph. And then I ended up with an extra tag because the editor was helping me. Okay, let's refresh the page and see if we have that new box. Okay, so now I have a place to put my meter time, and my meter time input box is given the ID meter time. Well, does that have a value or inner HTML? Oh, it's an input HTML element, and we know inputs have values, not inner HTML. So we want to take the meter time, because that's the ID, and get that DOM element and say change the value of the meter time to be whatever we got in the calculation and store it into converted meter time. I'm going to save that, refresh it. So if I went 53 seconds, convert to meters, I can see the conversion in my alert, and now that number got put into my meter time. Well, now we just need a little bit of cleanup. We don't really like to see extra decimal places for times. We only go to hundredths. So I'm going to add a .2 fixed on here. That will remove the extra digits because I only want 2 decimal places. Next, I don't really want to have to clear alerts all the time. That was just to help me debug it and make sure it's working correctly. I'm going to save it again. And I'll refresh it. I'll put in my 53 seconds, and I have my new time. And I'll test and make sure it just works for other times too. And you can see we have a functioning swim time converter.